The notification lit up my phone at 6:42 p.m. while I stood in the produce aisle, weighing Honeycrisp apples. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the self-checkout scale beeped as I adjusted the bag. My sister Brielle's message appeared in our family group chat, sharp and final, so grateful to accept the entire $670 million legacy today. Paperwork complete. Family, relax, I've got this. No phone call. No warning. Just a declaration that she'd claimed everything our mother had built. I pressed confirm on the payment screen, smiled at the cashier, and bagged my apples with steady hands. Inside, everything had shifted. I screenshot the message twice, then walked to my car as nothing had changed. But everything had. Before I tell you how I used a single document to dismantle my sister's empire brick by quiet brick, tell me in the comments, has a family member ever betrayed you so publicly that you had to choose between staying silent or fighting back? I'm reading every story because what happened next proved that the quietest authority can be the most devastating. The parking lot stretched empty under the Boise evening sky. One of my apples had split inside the bag, leaking sticky juice across the paper. I wiped my fingers on a napkin from the glove box, breathing slowly through my nose. My hands didn't shake. They never do anymore. I learned years ago that panic is a luxury people like me can't afford. I opened the glove box and pulled out a thin manila folder I'd kept sealed for 3 years. The edges were worn from being moved from apartment to apartment, car to car, always within reach but never opened. Not yet. I didn't need to read what was inside. I'd memorized every word the day my mother made me sign it. Instead, I placed it on the passenger seat and drove home through quiet streets, obeying every speed limit, signaling at every turn. Brielle thought she'd won. She had no idea the game had rules she'd never bothered to learn. My kitchen clock read 7:19 p.m. when I finally sat down at my small wooden table. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of someone's television through the walls. I made tea I didn't drink and opened the folder with careful fingers. Inside was a single document, heavy paper with a blue stamp in the corner, Preston Environmental and Charitable Trust, Independent Trustee, CALLA Preston. My mother had signed it 3 years before the cancer took her, in a lawyer's office that smelled like old books and furniture polish. Brielle had been there that day, scrolling through her phone, barely listening. When the lawyer explained my role, she laughed. Ceremonial paperwork, she'd called it. CALLA likes feeling important. I hadn't corrected her. I'd signed my name in blue ink and waited. Now, I read the fine print again, slower this time, marking certain phrases with my finger. It wasn't ceremonial. It had never been. At 8:02 p.m., my phone buzzed with notifications. Brielle had posted on LinkedIn a polished professional photo in soft lighting, wearing that neutral blazer she saved for important occasions. The caption made my jaw tighten, proud to lead our family legacy into the future. Grateful for trust, tradition, and responsibility. She'd tagged our late mother's memorial page. Within minutes, the comments flooded in. Heart emojis. Congratulations from business contacts who didn't know our family. Former colleagues writing so deserved, and your mother would be proud. I screenshot every single comment, saving them in a folder I titled simply Documentation. My cousin Tamsin texted me privately, "Did you see what Brielle posted? Are you okay?" I replied with a thumbs up emoji and nothing else. I wasn't okay. But I was strategic. And strategy required silence first, action later. I logged into the trust portal using the credentials my mother's attorney had given me. The system was outdated, the kind of interface that looked like it hadn't been updated since 2010, but it worked. Maps loaded slowly across my screen, showing the full scope of the Preston holdings. Our family ranch stretched across 12,000 acres, bisected by 2 rivers and bordered by federal conservation land. Underground, the mineral rights created a web of value that most people couldn't comprehend. Oil, natural gas, rare earth deposits. But what made it all function, what made any of it legal to extract, were the permits. Water usage permits. Environmental compliance certificates. Remediation bonds are posted with state agencies. Every single one of those documents required the signature of the independent environmental trustee. My signature. Not Brielle's. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. My mother hadn't given me a ceremony. She'd given me a veto. At 9:14 p.m., I drafted my first official communication. No emotion. No accusations. Just process. Formal probate accounting required per Trust Protocol, Section 4.7. All distributions are suspended pending a comprehensive review of environmental compliance and asset transfers executed post-mortem. Independent trustee authorization required for resumption of operations. I read it 3 times, checking for anything that could be interpreted as personal. It was perfectly bureaucratic. Perfectly legitimate. I hit submit and watched the confirmation screen appear. Somewhere in a server, a clock started ticking. Brielle wouldn't notice immediately. She was too busy celebrating. But her accountants would notice. Her lawyers would notice. And eventually, when the operations ground to a halt, she would notice too. I made more tea and sat by my window, watching the city lights. This wasn't revenge. This was stewardship. Exactly what my mother had asked me to provide. The email arrived at 11:07 p.m., just as I was getting ready for bed. Brielle's name in my inbox, subject line blank. Cute paperwork, CALLA. Focus on your little projects. I'll handle the real business. Don't embarrass yourself trying to play in the big leagues. I read it twice, noting the dismissive tone, the assumption that I was posturing. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded it to my attorney with a single line, "Please preserve with timestamp." Then I forwarded it to my personal email as backup. Then I screenshot it and saved it in 3 separate cloud storage locations. My mother used to say that in business, documentation beats conversation every single time. Brielle had just documented her contempt for the very authority that could destroy everything she'd claimed. I set my phone on my nightstand and went to sleep easily, the way I always did when I knew I was right. My attorney called at 7:03 a.m. the next morning. Desmond Cray was 67 years old, spoke in measured sentences, and had handled my mother's estate planning for 30 years. "CALLA," he said, his voice carrying that tone lawyers use when they're about to deliver important news. "I've reviewed the trust documents and the compliance requirements. Without your authorization on the environmental permits, Brielle's company cannot legally extract, transport, or sell a single unit of mineral revenue." He paused. "Do you understand what that means?" I poured coffee into my favorite mug, the one with the chipped handle. "It means she has access to nothing without me." "Precisely," Desmond said. "She can claim ownership. She can hire staff. She can make announcements. But she cannot monetize a single asset without your signature on those permits. I thanked him and hung up. The coffee tasted better than it had in months. I spent Tuesday morning doing exactly what I always did. I went to my job at the watershed conservation nonprofit, answered emails about grant applications, and attended a meeting about riparian restoration projects. My coworker Lennox asked if I was okay because I seemed distracted. I smiled and said I was fine, just tired. At lunch, I signed a document I'd been preparing for weeks, a temporary environmental impact review hold on all water withdrawal permits associated with Preston Trust operations. It was completely standard procedure. The kind of thing that happened all the time when new ownership took over resource extraction operations. It was also devastating to anyone trying to run those operations. The hold went into effect immediately. No theatrics. No press release. Just policy, applied correctly. I ate my sandwich and went back to answering emails about native plant species. My phone started buzzing at 2:47 p.m. Family group chat exploding. Uncle Terrence, what the hell are you doing? Cousin Winslow, you're sabotaging the family business. Aunt Demetria, your mother would be ashamed of you, CALLA. Cousin Tamsin again, privately, they're saying you filed something that's stopping operations. Is that true? I didn't respond to the group chat. I didn't defend myself. I screenshot every message, saved them in my documentation folder, and muted the conversation. To Tamsin, I wrote, I filed a standard compliance review. It's required by law. That's all. Which was true. Every word of it was true. By the time I left work at 5:30, I had 43 unread messages. I drove home in silence, windows down, breathing in the cooling evening air. Let them panic. Panic revealed the truth. And I needed to know who would stand where when this was over. Wednesday brought the first external consequence. A probate auditor named Genevieve Soto contacted Desmond's office, requesting a comprehensive review of all asset transfers executed between my mother's death and Brielle's assumption of control. Standard procedure in estates of this size, Desmond assured me, but also exactly what we needed. Genevieve wanted files. Bank statements. Correspondence. Timelines of who authorized what and when. Brielle's newly hired team of accountants would have to produce everything. I went home that evening and worked in my garden, hands in the soil, transplanting tomato seedlings I'd started from seed. The physical work steadied me. Sun on my shoulders. Dirt under my fingernails. Outside, I looked exactly like someone tending plants. Inside, I was building a case brick by careful brick, using nothing but the truth. Thursday afternoon, I found a box in my mother's storage unit that I'd been avoiding for months. Inside were letters, photographs, and a thick journal she'd kept during her final year. Most of it was too painful to read yet. But one letter was addressed to me directly, sealed in an envelope with my name in her careful handwriting. I opened it standing in that concrete storage space, surrounded by boxes of her life. CALLA, she'd written, I made you trustee because you are the only one who never chased money. You chased purpose. Brielle will fight you. She'll call you jealous, small, vindictive. Don't believe her. Protecting something matters more than owning it. You'll know what to do when the time comes. My hands shook while holding that letter. Not from fear. From recognition. She'd known exactly what would happen. And she'd chosen me anyway. Friday brought a crack in Brielle's facade. An email she sent to one of our primary extraction contractors got forwarded to me by mistake, one of those reply all accidents that reveal everything. Bypass CALLA's pointless delays and move forward anyway. I have operational authority and she's just creating obstacles for attention. I saved it immediately. Forwarded it to Desmond with a note, Exhibit G, then I forwarded it to the probate auditor's office with a polite message, FYI, may be relevant to your review of proper authorization protocols. Desmond called me within an hour. CALLA, she just documented herself instructing contractors to violate environmental law. I know, I said. She thinks I'm powerless. She still doesn't understand what I actually control. He was quiet for a moment. Your mother chose very, very well. I didn't disagree. The weekend was quiet. Too quiet. I cleaned my apartment, meal prepped for the week, and went for a long hike in the foothills. My phone stayed mostly silent except for a few messages from Tamsin, who was starting to ask harder questions. Are you trying to take control of the company? She texted Saturday evening. No, I wrote back. I'm trying to make sure it's run legally. Brielle says you're jealous that Mom trusted her with the business side. I stared at that message for a long time before responding. Mom trusted Brielle with operational management. She trusted me with environmental compliance. Both roles matter. I'm just doing mine. Tamsin replied with a thinking face emoji and nothing else. I hoped she was thinking. By Sunday night, I still hadn't heard directly from Brielle. That worried me more than the angry messages had. Monday morning, the local business journal ran a small headline, Preston Estate Operations Delayed Over Permit Review. The article was dry, factual, and boring. It mentioned routine environmental compliance procedures and standard probate processes. It didn't mention family drama or sibling conflict. But it mentioned Brielle's name in connection with delays and complications. I screenshot the article and save it. Not because I was proud. Because documentation mattered. By noon, 3 different family members had texted me asking if I'd seen it. I responded to none of them. At work, Lennox asked if everything was okay with my family. Just estate stuff, I said. It's complicated. She nodded sympathetically and changed the subject. I appreciated her more in that moment than she'd ever know. Some people understand that silence isn't secrecy. It's a strategy. Tuesday, I had a meeting with state environmental regulators that had been scheduled for months. It was routine for someone in my position, reviewing long-term sustainability requirements for resource extraction on conservation-adjacent land. But it was also an opportunity. I presented a proposal for updated environmental protections that would secure the land's ecological health for generations while still allowing sustainable mineral extraction. The regulators loved it. One of them used the word exemplary. By the time I left, I'd secured approvals that would protect the Preston holdings from future legal challenges while also making Brielle's aggressive extraction timeline completely impossible without my ongoing cooperation. I drove back to Boise feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not satisfaction exactly. Purpose. My mother had been right. Protecting something mattered more than owning it. Wednesday afternoon, Brielle finally called me. I was in a grocery store when my phone rang, standing in the canned goods aisle. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. "CALLA," she said, her voice tight. "We need to talk." "Okay," I said, moving toward a quieter corner. "I'm hiring an attorney to have you removed as trustee." This harassment has to stop. I paused next to a display of pasta sauce. What harassment? Don't play stupid. The permit holds. The audits. Talking to reporters. I haven't talked to any reporters, I said calmly. And the permit holds are required by law. I'm just doing my job. Your job, she spat, is ceremonial. You're not supposed to actually interfere with operations. That's not what the trust documents say, I replied. Maybe you should read them. She hung up. I finished my shopping, paid, drove home, and forwarded the call summary from my phone records to Desmond with a note, she's escalating. Desmond called me Thursday morning before I'd finished my coffee. Brielle's attorney sent a letter demanding your removal as trustee. He sounded almost amused. Can they do that? I asked. Only if they can prove you've engaged in criminal conduct, demonstrated incapacity, or violated your fiduciary duties. None of which applies. He paused. CALLA, she's misread the trust documents. She thinks you're in an advisory position. She genuinely doesn't understand that you have veto power. I sat down heavily. How is that possible? We sat in the same room when it was explained. People hear what they expect to hear, Desmond said. She expected a ceremony. You understood responsibility. Now she's learning the difference, and she's learning it publicly. I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat at my kitchen table and laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from exhausted relief. She'd misunderstood the entire structure. And now it was too late to fix it. The auditor's preliminary report arrived on Friday afternoon. Genevieve Soto had been thorough. She'd found rushed asset transfers that Brielle had authorized in the 3 weeks after our mother's death, moving money between accounts in ways that violated the trust's explicit conservation reinvestment clause. Every transfer was documented in my screenshot folders. The dates matched my timeline. The email evidence corroborated everything. Genevieve's report stopped short of using the word fraud, but the implications were clear. Brielle had treated the trust like her personal bank account, assuming no one would check. I had checked. I'd documented everything. And now a state auditor had independently verified what I'd already known. Desmond called me that evening. This is better than we hoped, he said. Better how? I asked. She's created an evidence trail that proves she shouldn't have operational control, he said. The probate court is going to have questions. Monday brought the first major crack. Brielle's chief financial officer resigned, effective immediately. The resignation letter was brief and professional, but it included one devastating phrase: ethical concerns regarding recent operational decisions. The business press picked it up. Small articles, nothing dramatic, but enough that people noticed. My phone started buzzing with messages from family members I hadn't heard from in years, suddenly wanting to know what's really going on. I didn't respond. I went to work, came home, tended my garden, and documented everything. Brielle stopped posting on LinkedIn. Stopped posting anywhere. The silence from her was louder than any of her earlier declarations. I watered my tomato plants and wondered how long it would take her to realize that volume had never been her strength. Precision was. And precision was mine. Thanksgiving arrived with uncomfortable inevitability. The family gathering was at Uncle Terrence's house, the same place we'd gathered for years. I almost didn't go. But absence would be interpreted as guilt or fear, and I felt neither. I arrived exactly on time, carrying a sweet potato casserole I'd made that morning. The room fell quiet when I walked in. Brielle was already there, standing near the fireplace with a glass of wine, surrounded by cousins. She looked at me without expression. I nodded at her. She didn't nod back. Dinner was strained. People asked me careful questions about my job, my apartment, anything except the trust. They asked Brielle nothing. By dessert, even Uncle Terence was directing questions to me about our mother's favorite recipes, her old garden plans. Brielle left early, claiming a headache. I stayed, helped clean up, and drove home feeling something shift. They were starting to see. The Monday after Thanksgiving, Brielle posted something on social media that made my stomach drop. Not on LinkedIn this time. On her personal account, visible to friends and family. If you think this is over, just wait. Some people mistake patience for weakness. They'll learn. It wasn't directed at me by name. But everyone knew. I screenshot it. Sent it to Desmond. And then I filed another routine environmental compliance report, this one documenting seasonal watershed concerns that would require extended monitoring through spring. Completely legitimate. Completely devastating to anyone trying to accelerate extraction schedules. I was done waiting for her to understand. She'd declared war in public. I would fight it with paperwork she couldn't see coming. Early December brought the consequence I'd been waiting for. A probate court order requiring the temporary reversal of all distributions Brielle had authorized until a comprehensive accounting could be completed. Money moved back into escrow. Operations froze. Accounts locked. I got the notification from Desmond on a Tuesday afternoon while I was in a meeting about salmon habitat restoration. I excused myself, walked to the bathroom, and read the order twice. It was everything we'd needed. Brielle's control was suspended. Not removed, but frozen. Pending investigation. Pending my cooperation with the auditors. Pending proof that she could operate within the law. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. My hands were steady. My reflection looked tired but certain. I went back to my meeting and finished discussing fish ladders. This was who I was. This was what mattered. The court hearing was scheduled for January 14th. I wore a gray suit I'd bought for my mother's funeral and hadn't worn since. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, wood paneling and fluorescent lights. Brielle sat on one side with 3 attorneys. I sat on the other side with Desmond. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Lorraine Kelby who'd presided over environmental cases for 20 years. She reviewed the documents in silence for what felt like hours. Then she looked up. "Ms. Preston," she said, addressing me directly. "Your actions as independent trustee protected this estate from significant legal and environmental liability." She turned to Brielle. "Your actions showed disregard for established protocols and legal requirements." The room was completely silent. No gasps, no reactions. Just the weight of official judgment. Operational control will remain suspended until Ms. Brielle Preston demonstrates a clear understanding of trust governance, Judge Kelby concluded. Brielle stared straight ahead. No tears. No outburst. Just the slow settling of defeat. We left through separate doors. 1 year later, I stood at the edge of the ranch property, watching sunrise paint the eastern hills gold and pink. The river ran clean below me, restored by the conservation investments I'd approved through the trust. Meadows stretched green and wild, protected by easements I'd negotiated with state agencies. Wildlife had returned, elk and hawks and species that had been absent for decades. The trust funds my mother's dream projects now. Watershed restoration. Native species preservation. Sustainable land management that would outlast all of us. I'd moved into a small house near the property, simple and sturdy, exactly what I needed. Brielle still had wealth. Distributions had eventually resumed, carefully monitored. She maintained a lifestyle most people would envy. But she didn't have control. She never would again. I had something different. Something rarer. I had stewardship of something worth protecting. I drove into town that afternoon and bought Honeycrisp apples, the same kind I'd been weighing when this all started. The parking lot was different, the store remodeled, but the ritual felt important. I took one apple and drove back to the ranch. Near the old water tower where my mother used to bring us as children, I knelt in the dirt. Split the apple open with my fingers and removed the seeds. Planted them carefully, one by one, in soil that had been in our family for 4 generations. Wind moved through the grass. The afternoon light slanted long and golden. I repeated Brielle's original text softly to the empty field, "Relax, I've got this." Then I covered the seeds with earth, patting it down gently. Not as revenge. As proof. Proof that growth takes time, that protection matters more than possession, that the quietest authority can reshape everything. They thought authority was money, volume, and ownership. I learned it was a responsibility. And responsibility, executed with precision, was the most powerful inheritance of all.